This is a result, though, of the world that we live in. There's something I can't really speak to because I'm not a chemist, but the fact that these molecules are so widely used with such a broad application, coming from things like pesticides, detergents, and plastics. Those are all three very different things. And yet there are molecules found in all of them that are estrogen mimetics, or acting like estrogen is, to varying degrees. And that's even more the case when we look at some of the foods we're eating that are increasingly plant-based. And when you are refining a plant, especially a seed, in order to, say, get its proteins, you end up getting a lot of other stuff. And so I'm very mindful of these other kind of supplements or whatever foods that we have in the home, to make sure that not only are we controlling, the plastics and the detergents, for example, but also that my kids, when I'm focusing on them getting protein, which is almost my simplest strategy for feeding my kids. It is based on real protein. I want it to be protein that's coming from animal sources, because I know that they're not going to get, among the benefits of just getting real fats and real proteins, which will work better, they're not going to be contaminated with these things I don't want, like these, say, phytoestrogens, which have a genuine biological effect.
When you really look at a lot of the research, and ironically enough, one of my nurse practitioner journals came recently, and the probably the soybean agenda that was being
Hmm.
pushed throughout there. Oh, women in perimenopause and menopause need soy, lots of soy milk, lots of edamame, use these soy-based products, soy-based protein. And so I'm very grateful that, unbeknownst to you, that you kind of touched on this topic, because on many levels, I think it all starts with food. I think on every level, the way to ensure that we can properly balance hormones, especially insulin, is based on the food choices that we're making. The plant-based agenda, the
Yep.
animal-based proteins versus plant-based proteins. There's little to no comparison between either of
Oh,
them.
that's right. Yeah, and that is absolute quantifiable, objective data. By any conceivable metric, animal protein is superior to plant protein. Full stop. Um, the 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 case that some would make that perimenopausal women need to be focusing on soy is absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Mhm.
Mind-blowing. Not only are you going to be getting an inferior source of protein by, again, every metric, and of all the times to start cutting out good protein, that would be the worst to do it, where you are
Mhm.
losing the bone protective effects of the estrogens. You want to do everything you can to keep those bones as strong and dynamic as possible. And that's what the proteins provide. They turn what would be a hard but brittle structure, and turns it into a hard and pliable structure, so allowing the bone to bend and not break. It is the worst thing to do, to focus on the vastly inferior source of protein that would come from soy. But also, there's an honest to goodness clinical case study that I'd seen. I can't cite it off the top of my head, but I know it, where this was a case report of a woman who would experience frequent uterine polyps and bleeding, and they scrutinized her diet and found that it was just soy everything. It was soy milk, it was soy, it was tofu, it was soy protein, powdered protein, whatever. And they had her cut all of that out, and it stopped. The uterine bleeding stopped, the polyps stopped growing. That's a pretty damning evidence, and against this just ridiculous notion that a woman ought to be focusing on soy. That's unethical, based on the
Mhm.
data that suggests it's unhealthy, and it's unethical based on the absolute lack of data, clinical data, suggesting that it's healthy at all.